The classroom fell silent when Professor Velna made the announcement. Her 6 eyes blinked nervously and her long ears twitched against her pale green skin. She was a Velkari, an herbivore species known for their gentle nature and brilliant minds. Today, however, she looked deeply uncomfortable. "Students," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "the Galactic Concordance has mandated new diversity protocols. Starting tomorrow, our class will include a student from a predator species." The reaction was immediate. 30 students gasped, chirped, and squeaked in alarm. The plenary student in the front row actually fainted, his small blue body hitting the floor with a soft thud. 2 Hilvex students near the back clutched each other, their fluffy tails wrapping together in fear. Only 2 students seemed calm. Hyun sat near the middle of the classroom, his dark eyes thoughtful. Beside him, his friend Minji continued taking notes as if nothing unusual had been said. They were both human, and they were the only ones of their kind at the Galactic Concordance Academy. "This is madness," shouted Tarek, a Bolvian with 4 arms and orange skin. "Predators are dangerous. They hunt, they kill. How can we learn with one of them in the room?" Professor Velna raised her hands, trying to calm the class. "Please understand, the Concordance believes all species deserve education. The predator species in question has passed all psychological tests. They are deemed safe for integration." "Safe?" another student squeaked. "There's no such thing as a safe predator." Hyun raised his hand. When Professor Velna nodded at him, he spoke in his usual calm voice. "What species is joining us?" "A Krell," the professor answered quietly. The classroom erupted again. The Krell were legendary. They came from a high-gravity world where only the strongest survived. They were massive hunters, standing 8 feet tall with thick scales, powerful claws, and multiple eyes that could see in many light spectrums. Their civilization was built on conquest and strength. They had only joined the Galactic Concordance 30 years ago, and many prey species still feared them deeply. "I'm requesting a transfer," Tarek announced, gathering his belongings. "I refuse to be prey in my own classroom." "Me too," said another student, "and me." Soon half the class was talking about leaving. Professor Velna looked helpless. Minji finally looked up from her notes and exchanged a glance with Hyun. He shrugged slightly and she smiled. "Professor," Minji said, her voice cutting through the chaos, "has the Krell student done anything wrong?" "Well, no, but then maybe we should meet them before we panic," Minji suggested. The other students stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Easy for you to say," Tarek muttered. "Humans are from a death world. You're probably too tough to be prey." Hyun laughed at that, which confused everyone. "Trust me, we're not that special. We're just used to giving people a chance." The next day, the classroom was tense. Only 20 students had returned. The others had successfully transferred to different classes. Armed security guards stood outside the door, which only made things worse. It suggested that even the station administration expected trouble. When Krell entered the room, the temperature seemed to drop. He was massive. His scales were deep red and black, layered like armor across his body. His arms were thick with muscle, ending in clawed hands that could crush metal. His head was angular and sharp, with 4 yellow eyes that scanned the room with predatory precision. When he walked, his footsteps were heavy and deliberate. He radiated power and danger. Every prey species student pressed themselves against the far wall. Some were shaking. One was crying softly. Krell stopped in the doorway, his eyes sweeping across the frightened faces. His lips pulled back slightly, revealing sharp teeth. It might have been a smile, but it looked like a threat. Then his gaze landed on Hyun and Minji. They were sitting in their usual seats, not cowering, not hiding. Hyun even raised his hand in a small wave. Minji nodded politely. Krell's eyes narrowed. He moved forward, his heavy steps making the floor vibrate slightly. He stopped directly in front of the 2 humans, looking down at them from his 8-foot height. He was clearly trying to intimidate them. "You are the Deathworlders," Krell said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "I have heard of humans. Soft. Weak. You smile too much." Hyun smiled at that comment, which seemed to confuse Krell. "Nice to meet you too." "I'm Hyun, and this is Minji. Welcome to the class. You do not fear me?" Krell asked. There was genuine curiosity in his voice now. "Should we?" Minji replied simply. Krell stared at them for a long moment, then made a sound that might have been laughter. "Foolish Deathworlders. You will learn." He moved to an empty seat in the back corner. The chair groaned under his weight. He had chosen the position with the best view of the entire room. A predator's instinct. Professor Velna tried to start the lesson, but it was useless. The prey species students couldn't focus. They kept glancing at Krell, watching his every movement. When he shifted in his seat, they flinched. When he reached for his datapad, they gasped. During the break, Hyun approached Krell. Minji followed him, though several students hissed warnings at them. "Hey," Hyun said casually. "Want to grab some food from the cafeteria?" Krell looked at him with all four eyes. "Why would you offer this?" "Because you're new, and the cafeteria is confusing if you don't know where things are," Hyun explained. "Plus everyone is staring at you. Might be nice to have someone to talk to." For the first time, Krell seemed uncertain. "You truly do not fear me?" "You haven't given us a reason to," Minji said. "You're just a student like us." Krell stood slowly, towering over both humans. Then he nodded once. "Very well. Show me this cafeteria." As they walked down the corridor, other students pressed themselves against the walls, their eyes wide. They stared at the sight of two small humans walking calmly beside a massive Krell predator. Some looked confused. Others looked horrified. In the cafeteria, Krell ordered a large portion of raw meat. Hyun got noodles and Minji chose rice and vegetables. They sat at a table together while everyone else stayed far away. "Your kind is strange," Krell said, tearing into his meal with his sharp teeth. "On my world, prey runs from predators. It is natural law." "On our world," Hyun replied, "we learned that the best way to survive is to work together. Predator or prey doesn't matter as much as you'd think." Krell paused, a piece of meat halfway to his mouth. His four eyes studied Hyun carefully. "You are either very brave or very stupid," Minji grinned. "Probably a bit of both." Krell made that grinding laugh sound again. Despite everything, he seemed almost amused by these strange humans who refused to treat him like a monster. But deep in his predatory mind, a question was forming. If humans came from a death world but acted so soft and friendly, what did that really mean? Were they weak, as he assumed, or was there something else going on? Something he didn't understand yet. Time, he decided, would reveal the truth. The combat training arena was built for safety. Soft floors, padded walls, and energy shields that could activate instantly if things got dangerous. It was designed for students from delicate species to practice basic self-defense without real risk. Today, however, it felt more like a cage. Krell stood in the center of the arena, his massive form casting long shadows under the bright lights. His scales gleamed like polished stone. His claws flexed slowly, a predator's reflex. Around the edges of the arena, the remaining students watched nervously from behind protective barriers. "Remember," Professor Velna announced, her voice trembling slightly through the speakers. "This is training only. No serious injuries. The safety shields will activate if necessary." The first opponent was Torvin, a Hilvek student with fluffy fur and 4 legs. He was quick and agile, known for his speed. He bounced nervously on his paws before the match began. When the signal sounded, Torvin immediately tried to use his speed advantage. He darted left, then right, trying to confuse Krell. But Krell's 4 eyes tracked every movement easily. When Torvin lunged forward to tap Krell's chest, the completion signal for a training match, Krell simply reached out with one massive hand. The movement was so fast that most students missed it. One moment Torvin was airborne. The next, Krell held him by the scruff of his neck, tangling him in the air like a toy. "Match over," Krell said calmly, setting Torvin down. Torvin scrambled away, his tail between his legs, his whole body shaking. The next opponent was Lisa, a planari with tentacles instead of arms. She tried to use her flexibility to wrap around Krell's leg, hoping to unbalance him. Krell simply grabbed 2 of her tentacles and held her at arm's length. She couldn't reach him, couldn't move him, couldn't do anything except dangle helplessly until she surrendered. One by one, prey species students tried and failed. Krell wasn't even breathing hard. He moved with the confidence of a hunter who knew he was the strongest thing in the room. Each victory seemed to prove what everyone already believed. Predators were superior and prey species couldn't compete. "This is humiliating," Tarek muttered from the viewing area. "We never should have let him in." Hyun and Minji watched quietly. They were sitting together as always, observing carefully. Minji was taking notes on her datapad. Hyun's expression was thoughtful. "Is there anyone else who wishes to attempt the training?" Professor Velna asked, clearly hoping the answer was no. Hyun stood up. I'll try. The entire arena went silent. Even Krell turned to look at him, all four eyes focusing on the human who was calmly removing his jacket. Hyun. No, whispered Torvin. You saw what he did to us. He's too strong. I'll be fine, Hyun replied with his usual calm smile. He walked down to the arena floor. Next to Krell, he looked tiny. Krell was 8 feet of muscle and scales and predatory power. Hyun was 5'9", slim, and looked completely ordinary. The contrast was almost comical. The Deathworlder wants to play, Krell said, and there was amusement in his grinding voice. Very well. I will be gentle with you. Don't be, Hyun replied simply. Professor Velna looked like she wanted to stop this, but the rules said any student could volunteer for training. Safety shields are at maximum, she announced nervously. Begin when ready. Krell didn't wait. He lunged forward with the same speed that had overwhelmed every other opponent. His clawed hand reached for Hyun, ready to end this in seconds just like all the others. His hand closed on empty air. Hyun had moved. Not stumbling or panicking, but a smooth sidestep that looked almost lazy. He was suddenly 3 feet to the left, standing relaxed. Krell's eyes narrowed. He attacked again, this time faster and more serious. His massive arm swept through the space where Hyun stood, but again the human wasn't there. Hyun had ducked under the swing, moved behind Krell, then circled back to the front. He hadn't attacked once. He was just dodging. Stand still, Krell growled, frustrated now. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The human was smaller, weaker. He should have been caught already. Krell launched into a full assault. He used his speed, his strength, his hunter's instincts. His claws cut through the air. His footwork was perfect, cutting off escape routes. He attacked high and low, using feints and combinations that would have worked on any warrior from his homeworld. Hyun dodged everything. He didn't look stressed. His breathing was steady. His movements were efficient, never wasting energy. When Krell attacked left, Hyun bent right. When Krell went low, Hyun jumped. When Krell tried to corner him, Hyun simply wasn't there anymore. The watching students were stunned into silence. This small human was making the mighty Krell look slow. Impossible, Tarek whispered. How is he that fast? Minji smiled slightly. He's not faster. He's just better at reading movements. The match continued for 3 full minutes. Krell was breathing harder now, frustrated and confused. He had never encountered prey that moved like this. On his world, prey ran in straight lines, panicking. They were easy to catch. But Hyun didn't panic. He flowed around attacks like water, always calm, always balanced. Finally, the timer buzzed. Match over, both fighters stopped. Krell stood there, his 4 eyes wide, his chest heaving. He hadn't landed a single hit. Hyun stood across from him, barely winded, still smiling slightly. Good match, Hyun said, bowing slightly in respect. Krell didn't respond. He just stared at the human, his predator mind trying to understand what had just happened. The arena was silent as Hyun walked back to his seat. Then slowly, the prey species students began to whisper among themselves. Something had just changed. The invincible predator had been fought to a standstill by one of the smallest students in the class. How did you do that? Torvin asked when Hyun sat down. Practice, Hyun replied simply. And paying attention. But he's so strong, so fast. Strength doesn't matter if you can't connect, Minji said. And speed is useless if you're predictable. Krell left the arena without speaking to anyone. His scaled face was unreadable, but something had shifted in the way he carried himself. The absolute confidence was gone, replaced by something else. Uncertainty, maybe, or the beginning of respect. That evening, in the station's database library, Krell sat alone at a terminal. His claws tapped slowly on the controls as he searched for information. He pulled up files on Deathworlds, on species classifications, on humans specifically. What he found confused him at first. Humans were classified as Deathworlders, yes, but their physical stats seemed unimpressive. They weren't the strongest or the fastest. Their senses were average at best. Their homeworld gravity was only 1G, less than his own 1.3G world. So why couldn't he touch that human in combat? He dug deeper into the files, reading about human evolution. Pursuit hunters, the text said. Endurance specialists. Tool users. Pack hunters with complex social structures. There was a video file showing humans hunting on their ancient world. Krell played it. He watched as primitive humans followed an animal for hours, then days. They didn't run fast. They just never stopped running. The prey would sprint away exhausted. The humans would follow at a steady pace. Sprint, follow, sprint, follow. Eventually, the prey animal simply collapsed from exhaustion, and the humans walked up to claim it. Krell's scales prickled with something unfamiliar. On his world, hunts were explosive bursts of speed and power, quick kills or quick escapes. But humans, they just kept coming. No matter how far you ran, they followed. Relentless, patient, inevitable. The text described it as persistence hunting, one of the most energy-efficient and terrifying hunting methods in nature. Krell sat back in his chair, thinking. In their match today, Hyun hadn't tried to overpower him. He'd just waited, dodged, conserved energy. If it had been a real hunt instead of a training match, Krell realized he would have eventually tired himself out while the human remained fresh. What kind of predator doesn't use strength? He muttered to himself. But deep down he was beginning to understand. Humans were predators, just a different kind. Not the explosive ambush hunters like Krell's species. Something else. Something that won through endurance and intelligence rather than raw power. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Krell felt something he hadn't expected to feel toward another species. Not fear exactly, but respect. And underneath that, a small seed of uncertainty about his assumptions. Maybe these smiling Deathworlders weren't weak after all. Maybe they were just smart enough to hide their true nature behind friendly faces. Professor Velna's xenobiology class was usually peaceful. Students learned about different species, their evolution, and their homeworlds. Today's topic was planetary classifications and how they shaped the species that evolved on them. The professor seemed nervous about teaching this particular lesson, with both a Krell and humans in the class. We will discuss Deathworld classifications, she began, her long ears drooping slightly. These are planets where survival requires significant physical and mental adaptations. The conditions are harsh, and evolution on these worlds tends to create particularly resilient species. She pulled up a holographic display showing various planets. They ranged from peaceful garden worlds with light gravity and gentle climates to nightmare worlds of extreme conditions. The classification scale runs from Class 1, which are garden worlds, to Class 12, which are the most hostile planets that can still support complex life. Most civilized species come from Class 2 to Class 4 worlds. Tarek raised one of his 4 hands. What class is my homeworld, Bolvia? Class 3, Professor Velna replied. Mild seasonal variations, standard gravity, abundant resources. Very comfortable. She gestured to other students. Most of you come from Class 2 to Class 4 worlds. These are ideal for developing civilization, because survival doesn't consume all your energy. What about predator worlds? Torvin asked nervously, glancing at Krell. Professor Velna hesitated, then brought up a new image. It showed a large planet with red and orange continents, dark oceans, and violent storm systems. This is Krellthos, homeworld of the Krell species. It is classified as a Class 7 Deathworld. The class leaned forward, curious despite their fear. The statistics appeared next to the planet. Gravity, 1.3 G. Average temperature, 95 degree with extremes up to 140 degree. Hostile fauna, 847 species capable of killing adult. Krell scarce water resources. Frequent seismic activity. High radiation levels in certain zones on Krellthos, the professor continued. Only the strong survive. Evolution favored size, strength, natural armor, and aggressive hunting instincts. The Krell became apex predators through raw physical superiority. Krell sat straighter, a hint of pride visible in his posture. These statistics explained why he had dominated the combat training so easily. He was literally built by evolution to be a perfect hunter. Class 7 is impressive, Velna said carefully. Very few species from Class 7 worlds achieve civilization. The survival requirements are simply too demanding. The Krell are exceptional in this regard. What about humans? Asked Lisa, her tentacles curling nervously. You said they're Deathworlders too. The room went quiet. Everyone turned to look at Hyun and Minji, who sat calmly taking notes. Krell's 4 eyes also focused on them, curious now. Professor Velna's hands trembled slightly as she brought up a new image. A blue and green planet appeared, beautiful and peaceful looking, with white clouds swirling across its surface. It looked almost like a paradise world. This is Earth, she said quietly, homeworld of humanity. The planet looked so gentle that several students relaxed. If this was a death world, it couldn't be that bad. It looked nicer than many Class 3 worlds. Then the statistics appeared, and the room went dead silent. Classification Class 12. Deathworld Gravity, 1.0 G. Oxygen content, 21%, highly combustible. Weather systems, extreme variability. Natural disasters, all types present hostile fauna. Previously 2,000 plus megafauna species. Evolution pressure, extreme, class. 12? Tarek whispered. That's the highest rating possible. Yes, Professor Velna confirmed, her voice shaky. Earth is rated as one of the most hostile life-supporting planets in the known galaxy. Krell leaned forward, his claws gripping the edge of his desk. Impossible, look at it. It's beautiful. And the gravity is only 1.0 G, less than my world. The gravity is deceptive, the professor explained. Earth's danger doesn't come from one factor. It comes from everything combined. Let me show you. The holographic display changed, showing Earth's extreme weather. Hurricanes that could flatten entire cities. Tornadoes with winds over 200 miles per hour. Blizzards that could freeze exposed flesh in minutes. Droughts lasting years. Floods covering thousands of square miles. Earth has every type of natural disaster, Velna said. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, wildfires, and ice storms. Sometimes multiple disasters happen at once. The display showed more. Temperature ranges from minus 130 degrees to plus 135 degrees. Regions where the air itself could kill you. Oceans so deep and dark that pressure would crush most species. Deserts where nothing could survive. Jungles so dense and full of life that every plant and animal competed violently for resources. But the fauna, Minji said quietly, drawing everyone's attention. You said 2,000 megafauna species. Past tense. Yes, Professor Velna nodded, because humans hunted most of them to extinction. With primitive weapons. Stone spears, wooden arrows, fire. The class stared in shock. Krell's scales seemed to pale slightly. The display showed images from Earth's history. Massive creatures called mammoths, 10 feet tall with tusks like spears. Giant bears that stood 12 feet high. Saber-toothed cats with fangs longer than human hands. Terror birds. Cave lions. Dire wolves. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, the professor continued. They weren't the strongest or the fastest, but they could run for days without stopping. They would chase prey until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Their endurance was and is unmatched. Hyun raised his hand. Professor, you should mention the temperature adaptation. Ah, yes. Velna pulled up new data. Humans have a unique cooling system. They sweat through their skin, which allows them to regulate body temperature far better than most species. A human can function in temperatures that would kill most of us. They survived ice ages and desert expanses. They also, Minji added casually, climbed to the top of the food chain without natural weapons. No claws, no fangs, no armor, no venom. Just brains and determination. Krell's four eyes were wide now. You hunted megafauna with pointed sticks? And strategy, Hyun replied. Humans are pack hunters. We cooperated. We made plans. We used tools. One human might not beat a mammoth, but 10 humans working together. That mammoth became dinner. The professor brought up a video file. It showed ancient humans hunting. They didn't charge in with strength like Krell would. They didn't flee like prey. Instead, they worked as a team. Some distracted the animal. Others attacked from the sides. They used fire to drive prey into traps. They used spears thrown from a distance. They followed wounded animals for days until infection or exhaustion killed it. Pursuit predators, whispered Torvin. They just never stopped coming. Earth taught humans to be adaptable, Professor Velna explained. Ice Age. They made clothes and fire. Drought. They followed water sources for hundreds of miles. Dangerous predators. They hunted them to extinction. Every challenge Earth threw at them, they overcame. They learned to survive everything. Krell sat very still, his mind racing. His world was harsh, yes, but it was consistently harsh. You evolved to handle it, and then you were apex. But Earth? Earth was unpredictable, constantly changing. You couldn't evolve one perfect solution, because the challenges kept shifting. Humans had to be adaptable, creative, relentless. The classification isn't just about how hard survival is, Minji said, looking directly at Krell. It's about what kind of species the planet creates. My ancestors survived ice ages that killed almost everything else. They crossed oceans in wooden boats. They tamed fire and lightning. They split the atom. When Earth tried to kill them, they thrived anyway. But you seem so... Tarek struggled for words. So friendly. So peaceful. Hyun smiled that calm smile. Because we learned something important. The deadliest predator isn't the strongest one. It's the one that hunts in packs. Cooperation made us successful. We're not dangerous because we're aggressive. We're dangerous because we choose when to be. The classroom was silent for a long moment. Every prey species student was looking at the humans with new eyes. Not with the fear they showed Krell, but with something else. A deeper, more unsettling awareness because Krell looked like a predator. His scales, his claws, his teeth, everything about him screamed danger. You knew to be afraid of him, but Hyun and Minji looked harmless. They smiled. They helped others. They seemed gentle. And yet they came from a world that made Class 7 Krelthos look mild. They were descended from hunters who chased prey until it died of exhaustion. They were pack predators who conquered their entire planet using nothing but cooperation and intelligence. Krell finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. When we sparred, you never attacked me. Didn't need to, Hyun replied. Persistence hunting isn't about fighting. It's about outlasting. In a real situation, I would just wait until you got tired. And if I didn't tire, Minji answered this time, then Hyun would call for help and 10 more humans would show up. We don't believe in fair fights. We believe in winning. Krell looked at his claws, then at the humans. In combat training, he had thought he was holding back to avoid hurting the weak Deathworlder. Now he wondered if it was actually the human who had been holding back. Hyun hadn't tried to hurt him. Hadn't tried to fight, just evaded and waited, like a hunter waiting for prey to exhaust itself. Class dismissed, Professor Velna said weakly. She looked like she needed to sit down, as students filed out. The alarm started during lunch, a harsh blaring sound that made everyone in the cafeteria freeze. Red emergency lights began flashing throughout the station, casting everything in a hellish glow. Attention all personnel, came the automated voice through the speakers. Reactor coolant leak detected in Sector 7D. Radiation levels rising. Evacuate surrounding areas immediately. This is not a drill. Students began panicking, gathering their belongings and rushing toward the exits. Hyun and Minji stood calmly, listening carefully to the emergency broadcast. Krell was at a nearby table, his meal forgotten. All personnel to emergency stations, the voice continued. Engineering teams report to Crisis Command. Reactor failure imminent in 15 minutes without manual intervention. Professor Velna burst into the cafeteria, her face pale with fear. Students, please evacuate to the upper levels in an orderly fashion. Follow the emergency routes. What's happening exactly? Hyun asked, stepping forward. The primary coolant system failed, Velna explained quickly. Coolant is leaking into the reactor chamber. If it's not fixed manually, the reactor will overheat and fail. We'd lose life support for the entire station. Can't robots fix it? Minji asked. The radiation and heat have fried the automated systems. Someone needs to go in and repair it manually. Velna's voice cracked. But the conditions down there, no one can survive long enough. Krell had approached, listening. What are the conditions? Velna pulled up her datapad with shaking hands. Temperature is 180 degrees Fahrenheit and rising. Radiation levels are at 400 rems and increasing. The atmosphere is toxic with coolant vapor. Even with a protective suit, no one can survive more than a few minutes. How long would the repair take? Hyun asked. Engineering estimates 10 to 12 minutes minimum. The cafeteria was emptying rapidly, but a few students had stayed to listen. Tarek was there, his orange skin pale with fear. Torvin huddled near the wall, his ears flat against his head. We're all going to die. Someone whimpered. Krell straightened to his full height. I will go. Everyone turned to stare at him. Professor Velna's eyes widened. Krell, that's incredibly brave, but my species is strong, Krell said firmly. If anyone can survive those conditions, it is a Krell warrior. I will not let this station die without trying. There was honor in his voice, a predator's courage in the face of danger. He left immediately, heading toward the engineering bay where they were preparing emergency equipment. Professor Velna followed, trying to coordinate with the crisis team. Hyun and Minji exchanged a look. We should go watch, Minji said quietly. Yeah, Hyun agreed. They made their way to the engineering level, where a crowd had gathered outside the sealed blast doors leading to Sector 7D. Screens showed the interior of the reactor chamber, a hellish space filled with steam and red warning lights. The temperature reading was climbing. 185 degree, 190 degree. Krell stood ready, wearing the best protective suit the station had. It was designed for emergency situations, with radiation shielding and a self-contained air supply. But everyone knew it wasn't enough for these conditions. The engineers had explained the problem. The suit would protect him for maybe 3 minutes, 4 at most. He needed at least 10 minutes to complete the repairs. "This is suicide," an engineer said quietly. "I am Krell," he replied simply. "We do not flee from danger." He stepped into the airlock. The blast doors sealed behind him. Everyone watched the screens as Krell entered the reactor chamber. The heat was visible as waves of distortion in the air. Coolant vapor made visibility poor. Warning symbols flashed everywhere. Krell moved quickly to the damaged coolant junction. His large hands, usually so precise, struggled with the small tools needed for the repair. The suit was already starting to smoke slightly from the extreme heat. 2 minutes, someone announced. Heart rate spiking. Core temperature rising. On screen, Krell's movements were becoming slower. The heat was affecting him through the suit. His scaled skin, which could withstand his homeworld's harsh sun, was not designed for this level of sustained exposure. 3 minutes. Suit integrity at 60%. Krell managed to remove the damaged component, his hands shaking now. He reached for the replacement part but dropped it. The heat was overwhelming even his considerable strength. 4 minutes. Core temperature critical. Recommend immediate extraction. "No." Krell's voice came through the radio, thick and strained. "Not finished." He bent to pick up the dropped part, but his legs buckled. The mighty Krell warrior fell to one knee, struggling to breathe even through the suit's air supply. His 4 eyes were unfocused. "Pull him out," Professor Velna screamed. "He's dying!" Engineers rushed into the airlock. The moment the inner door opened, 2 of them in emergency gear dragged Krell's smoking body out of the chamber. They pulled him to safety, ripping off the suit helmet. Krell's scales were scorched in places and he was barely conscious. "Medical team," someone shouted. The medics arrived, working on Krell immediately. He was alive but in bad condition. Thermal damage, radiation exposure, respiratory distress. They loaded him onto a stretcher and rushed him away. "The repair isn't finished," an engineer said quietly. "We have maybe 10 minutes before total reactor failure." "Is there anyone else who can try?" Velna asked desperately. "No one. Krell was the strongest species on the station. If he couldn't survive it, no one can." Silence fell over the group. The temperature reading on the screen continued to climb. 195 weather, 200 IGFO. The radiation levels were increasing too. It was a death trap that had defeated even an apex predator from a Class 7 Deathworld. Hyun stepped forward. "I'll go." Every head turned to look at him. For a moment, no one spoke, thinking they had misheard. "Absolutely not," Professor Velna said firmly. "Hyun, Krell is 3 times your size and far stronger. If he failed, you won't last 30 seconds in there." "Maybe," Hyun said calmly. "But I have advantages he doesn't." "What advantages?" an engineer demanded. "You're half his size. You'll cook instantly." Krell's species evolved for strength, not endurance, Hyun explained, already moving toward the emergency suits. "My species evolved for exactly this kind of situation. Sustained exposure to extreme conditions. That's what Class 12 Deathworlders do." "That's insane," Tarek shouted. "You can't—" "He's right," Minji said quietly. Everyone turned to her. "Humans have the best temperature regulation of any known species. Our sweat cooling system is unique, and we evolved to keep going when other species would collapse. It's literally what we do." Hyun was pulling on a protective suit. Krell was fighting against his biology. That heat exhausts his species quickly. But humans, we ran across deserts on Earth. We survived in places that hit 130 degrees. Our bodies are designed to shed heat and keep functioning. "The radiation," an engineer started. "Will hurt me," Hyun finished. "I know, but I can complete the repair in the time I have." Krell got close. "I just need to finish it." Professor Velna grabbed his arm. "This could kill you." Hyun smiled that calm smile. "Then you better make sure the medical team is ready when I come back out." He sealed his helmet and stepped into the airlock before anyone could stop him. The inner door closed and then opened into the reactor chamber. The heat hit him like a physical force. Through the screen, everyone watched as Hyun moved steadily toward the coolant junction. Unlike Krell's powerful strides, Hyun's movements were measured and efficient. not wasting energy, not fighting the environment. 1 minute, someone whispered. Hyun picked up where Krell had left off. His smaller hands were actually better suited for the delicate repair work. He removed damaged connectors and began installing the replacement part. 2 minutes. His vitals are actually stable? It was true. While Hyun's heart rate was elevated, it wasn't spiking like Krell's had. His core temperature was rising, but slowly. The suit's internal temperature read 115 degrees and Hyun was still working steadily. 3 minutes. Sweat was pouring off Hyun inside the suit. Not because he was panicking, but because that was his body's defense mechanism. Humans sweated through millions of pores, creating a cooling system that worked even in extreme heat. While Krell's species panted and overheated, humans just kept sweating and kept going. 4 minutes. Suit integrity at 45%. Hyun secured the first connector, then moved to the second. His movements were slower than when he started, but still steady, methodical. He was pacing himself like a long-distance runner, not a sprinter. 5 minutes. How is he still conscious? An engineer whispered. 6 minutes. The second connector was in place. Hyun moved to the third. His hands were shaking slightly now, but he maintained control. On Earth, his ancestors had hunted in 110-degree heat for hours. They had crossed deserts that killed other predators. This heat was worse, yes, but the principle was the same. Keep moving, stay focused, don't stop. 7 minutes. Third connector secured. 1 more to go. Hyun's suit was smoking now, just like Krell's had been. But Hyun himself was still functioning. His vision was narrowing, but he could see the final connection point. 8 minutes. Internal suit temperature 130 degrees. Hyun's movements were definitely slower now. But he reached the final connector, his hands working mechanically. He had to try 3 times to align it properly, but it clicked into place. 9 minutes. He activated the coolant system. Green lights began replacing red ones on the panel. The repair was complete. 3 days after the reactor incident, Hyun was released from medical care. His recovery had been surprisingly fast, another trait of his hardy Deathworld biology. The doctors said his body had handled the thermal stress better than expected, though he still needed to take things easy for a while. Krell remained in medical for 2 more days. His injuries had been more severe. 2nd-degree burns on his scales, respiratory damage from the toxic atmosphere, and significant radiation exposure. When he was finally released, he moved more slowly than usual, his powerful body still healing. The station had changed in those few days. Word of what happened had spread through every level, every species community. The human who had saved them all became something of a legend. But more than that, the way people viewed both Krell and Hyun had shifted dramatically. Krell walked through the corridors, and where before prey species had fled from him, now they nodded respectfully. Some even thanked him for his bravery. He had tried to sacrifice himself to save them, and that earned respect even from those who feared predators. But it was Hyun who received the most attention. Students stopped him constantly to thank him, to ask how he was feeling, to marvel at what he'd done. The gentle human who smiled and helped others had walked into conditions that defeated an apex predator, and succeeded. On the 5th day after the incident, Krell found Hyun in the station's observation deck. It was a quiet space where students often came to look out at the stars and think. Hyun was sitting alone, staring through the massive windows at the planet below. Krell approached slowly, his claws clicking on the metal floor. Hyun turned, saw him, and smiled. "Hey, Krell. Good to see you up and moving. How are you feeling?" "Better," Krell replied. He sat down on a nearby bench which groaned under his weight. For a moment, neither spoke. They just sat together, watching the stars. Finally, Krell broke the silence. "I have been thinking," he said quietly, "about many things. About strength. About what it means to be a predator." Hyun waited, not interrupting. "On my world," Krell continued, "strength is everything. The strong survive and rule. The weak perish. It is simple, clear, and natural." His 4 eyes turned to look at Hyun. "I came to this station believing the same applied everywhere. I saw prey species as weak because they feared me. I saw you and the human female as soft because you smiled and cooperated with others. And now?" Hyun asked gently. "Now I understand I was wrong." Krell's voice was heavy with something unfamiliar, humility. "I thought I was the strongest in our class. I believed my physical power made me superior. But when the true test came, when the station needed someone to face impossible conditions, I failed. You didn't fail, Hyun said firmly. You went in there knowing it might kill you. You tried to save everyone. That's not failure, that's courage. But I could not complete the task. You did? You got most of the way there. I just finished what you started. Hyun looked out at the stars again. Krell, you need to understand something. Your species evolved to be strong because that's what your world required. Mine evolved to endure because that's what Earth required. Neither is better. They're just different solutions to different problems. Krell was quiet for a moment. That day in combat training, he finally said, when we sparred, you never tried to hit me. Didn't need to. Because you were waiting for me to tire. Partially, Hyun admitted, but also because I didn't need to prove anything. You're physically stronger than me, Krell. That's just a fact. But strength isn't everything. If we'd been in a real survival situation, I would have used strategy, teamwork, tools, whatever worked. You would have called other humans to help. Probably, Hyun said with a slight smile. Humans learned a long time ago that working together makes us stronger than fighting alone. That's how we survived Earth. Krell looked down at his claws, flexing them slowly. My people value individual strength. Warriors fight alone to prove their worth. We see asking for help as weakness. And that works on your world, Hyun replied. But in a wider galaxy, sometimes cooperation beats competition. Minji entered the observation deck carrying 3 cups of hot drinks. She saw them and smiled. Thought you two might want something. It's cold tea for Krell and coffee for Hyun. She sat down with them and Krell accepted the tea with a nod of thanks. Minji had brought him something suited to his biology without being asked. It was a small gesture but meaningful. I have a question, Krell said, looking between the 2 humans. Why do you act so gentle? So friendly? You come from a Class 12 Deathworld. Your species hunted megafauna to extinction. You can survive conditions that nearly killed me. Yet you smile and help others and treat even prey species with kindness. Why? Hyun and Minji exchanged a glance. Then Hyun spoke. Because we learned something important in our evolution. Yes, humans are predators. We hunted, we fought, we competed. But we also cooperated. We formed tribes, then villages, then cities, then nations. We learned that the most dangerous predator isn't the one that fights alone. It's the one that hunts in packs. Pack hunting, Krell said slowly. Working together. Right, Minji continued. But it goes deeper than that. Humans evolved something called pack bonding. We form emotional connections with others, even with species that aren't human. We cooperate not just because it's effective, but because we genuinely care about our pack. Your pack? Krell's eyes narrowed in confusion. But I am not human. The prey species in our class are not human. How can we be your pack? Because that's how human brains work, Hyun explained. We bond with whoever we spend time with, whoever we trust, whoever we share experiences with. It's not logical, it's just how we evolved. Humans on Earth had pets. Other species they brought into their homes and treated like family. We formed bonds with wolves that became dogs, with wildcats, even with prey animals like horses. That makes no sense from a survival perspective, Krell said. Actually, it does, Minji replied. Those bonds made us stronger. Dogs helped us hunt. Horses helped us travel. Even friendships with other tribes meant we could trade, share knowledge, and support each other. Cooperation became our survival strategy. Hyun leaned back. So when you ask why we're gentle and friendly, it's because we choose to be. Yes, humans can be dangerous. We toppled every predator on our planet. We conquered our world. We survived ice ages and plagues and countless disasters. But we also learned that the strongest position isn't being the most feared. It's being the most trusted. Krell sat silent, processing this. His worldview had been built on strength and dominance. But these humans were showing him a different path. One where power came from cooperation rather than competition. When I attacked you in training, Krell said slowly, you could have hurt me. I see that now. You have techniques, speed, strategy, but you only defended. Because you weren't really my enemy, Hyun said simply. You were just testing me and I was testing you back. Neither of us needed to get hurt. And in the reactor chamber, Krell continued, working through his thoughts. You risked your life to save the station, to save all of us, including prey species that fear you. Of course, Minji said. They're part of our pack now. Our class, our station, our community. Humans protect their pack. Something shifted in Krell's expression. His four eyes widened slightly as understanding finally clicked. You have pack bonded with me. Yeah, Hyun said with a grin. Pretty much from the first day. When everyone else ran away, we came over to talk. That's when it started. But I was hostile. I dismissed you as weak. You were defensive in a new environment, Minji corrected. We understood that. New pack members are always uncertain at first. Krell stood suddenly, his full height towering over the seated humans. For a moment, he just stared at them. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered himself into a crouch so his head was level with theirs. In Krell culture, this was a gesture of respect between equals. I understand now, he said, his grinding voice softer than they'd ever heard it. True strength is not just physical power. It is knowing when to fight and when to cooperate, when to dominate and when to protect. My people's way works for us, but it is not the only way. Your way has value too, Hyun assured him. Sometimes strength and courage are exactly what's needed. You proved that in the reactor chamber. You went in first, knowing the risk. That's warrior courage, and it's admirable. Perhaps, Krell said, and there might have been the tiniest hint of warmth in his tone. Perhaps there is a third way, not the Krell way of individual strength, not just the human way of pack cooperation, but something new, combining both. Now you're thinking like a human, Minji laughed. Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened in Professor Velna's class. Krell began training with Hyun and Minji regularly, not competing against them, but working with them. They taught him their strategies and techniques. He taught them about Krell combat forms and warrior discipline. The prey species students watched in amazement as an apex predator and two Deathworld humans became an effective team. Krell's strength combined with human strategy created something greater than either alone. But more than that, Krell began to change in subtle ways. He still moved with predator grace and power, but he also started helping other students. When Torvin struggled with a heavy equipment load, Krell carried it for him without being asked.